Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be back with you again tonight for another one of our podcasts. This one is the second in our edition of the North Carolina History Focus, and we are very excited about our special guest tonight, and Beth is going to introduce him to you.
Yes, we are very excited to have RG Absher with us tonight. Just to give you a little intro to RG, he is a retired park ranger and park manager with 32 years of service from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He currently is executive director of the Yadkin River Greenway in Wilkes County. Trails and trail-related projects have been a major aspect of RG's interest the last few years.
RG has been a member of the Overmountain Victory Trail Association, also known as OVTA, since 1983, and since then has emerged as one of the OVTA's leaders in promoting the trail and telling the story of the campaign to Kings Mountain.
Also, RG is near and dear to my heart because he has been a part of our Fraser's Ridge homecomings from early on, in fact, from the very first one. And he also provides us and is going to be providing us this year, this coming fall, with music, ghost storytelling, and other duties such as running my sound. And thank you so much for doing that, RG. You know the problems we had the first year. Both RG and his sweet better half, Molly, are a part of our Outlander, North Carolina clan and enjoy absorbing themselves in the Outlander stories, as do we all. And to kick it off tonight, RG, I think you've got something a little special for us, right?
Yes, this is St. Patty's Day. Yeah. And for that, I've got my Celtic green on here. And for headgear, the Highland bonnet, I'm going to play a couple of little tunes to kick things off because of being St. Patrick's Day. Whoops, let me start that over. My bow was down. It's causing it.
RG, you don't mess up.
I got string out too. I'll fix that too. You want to do this through the whole tune? Pick it up there. No, just from there.
Very good.
There you go.
Thank you, RG.
Yeah, I guess we're ready to start with the questions.
Yeah, well, RG, in case you don't know RG, and many of you may not, but if you haven't been to the homecoming, he plays just about every instrument that. What do you play, RG?
Play hammer, dulcimer, fiddle, guitar, and banjo, which I do. I use that primarily on Saturday night.
Right.
We have more of the American Appalachian music coming in.
Right.
And which we gradually start the music real traditional Celtic, and we go the second night is kind of a hybrid.
That's right.
Of Appalachian Celtic. And the third night is American bluegrass.
That's
full
right.
blown.
And I love
it. So it's all fun.
Cool.
Well, let's get started with our questions because you're going to be talking about something that's going to be very pertinent to the upcoming book that's coming out Go Tell the Bees That I'm Gone, the 9th book in Diana's series. And we're going to be talking tonight, just the first part of this, because we're going to be interviewing you some more, is about the Overmountain Men. And I think they're going to play a really big part in the next book. So we wanted, since you are part of the Overmountain Men, we wanted to talk to you and ask you some questions and find out more about who they were and the battle. So let me just ask, because a lot of people don't know anything about the Battle of Kings Mountain. It was not very, it's not widely publicized as being a very important event, but we know now that it was. So tell me, RG, what led to the Battle of Kings Mountain?
Well, the British, after 4 years of long fighting in the North, battles from Lexington and Concord, all the way through to the battles of New York, Brandywine, and Saratoga, and the other military campaigns in the North, had kind of come to a point of a stalemate, where neither George Washington's army or Lord Cornwallis's army had a foothold. And so the British came up with another option, or alternative, let's say. They said, let's go into South Carolina, where we have loyalist-friendly lowland planters who depend upon England trade, and let's recruit loyalist Americans to fight Americans. Well, that strategy almost worked. Spring of 1780, the British took Charleston in a very humiliating defeat for the American side. The Continental forces were really broken up badly. And then the British moved in South Carolina under the command of Charles Lord Cornwallis, who then moved into the area of Camden, South Carolina. And things went downhill for the American cause that the summer of 1780. In fact, in August of 1780, the British defeated the American forces under Horatio Gates soundly at the Battle of Camden in Camden, South Carolina. Beautiful historic place if you go there today. Oh, they've got a wonderful place to go visit. Their facilities on the grounds there. And excuse me, I would encourage folks to do that. So, but the Battle of Camden really broke up a lot of the American support for a time. There was only one line of resistance yet remaining for the American cause. These were the backwoodsmen, the rugged men back in the backcountry of North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, Southern Virginia, and in upcountry South Carolina, referred to as the Overmountain Men.
All right. So they were, the Overmountain Men were fighting against the British, right? That was the thing that they were going to be doing, right?
That's correct. They were referred to as loyalists and sometimes referred to as Tories. And if you watch such movies as The Patriot today, and of course it comes out in Outlander when they're in North Carolina, a huge amount of civil conflict and people that couldn't decide which side of the fence to be on. And they were very steadfast in which side they chose. Of course, that sounds familiar, of course, but the important thing is that the Patriot movement held on, and the Overmountain Men were to make the difference in the subsequent few weeks that followed leading up to the Battle of Kings Mountain.
Okay. Well, you've mentioned several names. Why were they called the Overmountain Men exactly?
Well, many of them, and they get their claim to fame because of the Overmountain forces that resided in the mountains. The land of the Nolichucky River watershed, the Watauga River, the Holston Valley, New River Valley of North Carolina. And those particular men did come from the mountain stock and were particularly, as they would say back in the day, rough and ready. And they were trained and able and experienced in Indian fighting and guerrilla fighting. Also, meanwhile, at the same time along the Yadkin River Valley, you had the men referred to along the Catawba and the Yadkin rivers. They weren't Overmountain Men as such, but a lot of times they were referred to by the British and even Patrick Ferguson as the backwater men. And that was a pretty good description of them as well. But what really stuck was the Overmountain Men. I guess it sounded a little better, or presented itself with better marketing for today's purposes or whatever. So the Overmountain Men stuck, although a third of the forces were from the Yadkin Valley, from Surrey and Wilkes County. About 350 fighting men out of 1,000 were from Wilkes and Surrey County. So, but what really won the naming rights was the Overmountain Men, those that actually lived across the mountain.
Right. And who came over the mountain to get to where they needed to go.
Yeah, and of course, somebody from present-day Gastonia or present-day 96 South Carolina, or Easley, South Carolina, or Rock Hill, South Carolina, those folk were not Overmountain Men, obviously, but they were still part of the Overmountain force.
Well, you mentioned Patrick Ferguson just a little bit ago. So tell me what was it that he said and did that caused the Overmountain Men to act, and who was, just to give us a little history on Patrick Ferguson.
Okay. Patrick Ferguson was born in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1744. He rose up with an early interest in the British military. In fact, he joined the British Army in the cavalry as a cavalry soldier at age 16. He rose up in the ranks and became a lieutenant colonel by the time of the campaign to the King's Mountain. In fact, Lord Cornwallis had the commissioning paperwork approved that Ferguson didn't know about to become colonel. He's technically a colonel, in other words, not a lieutenant colonel, but on paper, he was still lieutenant colonel because he hadn't received his paperwork yet to be commissioned as colonel. Patrick Ferguson had a notorious reputation as a fighter, and actually lost the use of his right hand at the Battle of Brandywine, when he became wounded there. And he wound up having to hold his horse reins in his teeth as he rode in the battles. And that's the kind of determination he had. He was also a very determined and capable recruiter. He would go into the town in low country South Carolina, and he would impress on the folk there a very enthusiastic plea to not allow the mongrels of the world and the backcountry ruffians, as he often referred to them, to rule the day, and to sign up and let's fight for the king and preserve the crown. And he was a good recruiter. He had a strong force of about 1,050 men on top of that mountain, the Battle of King's Mountain. He was also trained very well in the art of war, the use of the bayonet charge, the use of the musket firing in volleys. He was inventor of the Ferguson rifle, which was a breech-loading 18th century rifle, and he tried to get it commissioned, but the British would not let him because military a lot of times don't move on to newfangled gadgetry until it's proven. And had he had that breech-loading rifle at the Battle of King's Mountain, it might have been bleak for the American cause. Because I've seen demonstrations on the Ferguson rifle. I actually fired one myself, and you can fire it 7 times a minute. So it was truly the 18th century assault rifle of its day. Wow. And for a Pennsylvania rifle like this, the Overmountain Men were armed with and used for hunting in the backwoods of the Carolinas and Tennessee and Virginia. The Deckard rifle, or the Pennsylvania rifle, it takes about a minute, start to finish, to load the rifle. The musket, on the other hand, can be standard musket, musket smoothbore that the British use, can be loaded about 3 to 4 times a minute. So even the firepower of a musket's much greater than that of a rifle. Where the rifle has the advantage is straight line accuracy over distance. In the 18th century, good marksmen, and markswomen too, because the women living on the frontier could also shoot. I think we recall the scene with Jamie firing the gun, knocking off a certain pirate by the name of Bonnet distance. So Jamie was a good shot. And because they were sometimes defending the homeland because their husbands were out in the field or at a militia event, muster, training, and they had to defend their homeland. So they were quite good at that.
Yeah.
But Patrick Ferguson he used his skill in recruiting like no other before him. Now, the scene was, excuse me, in September 1780. Patrick Ferguson was commissioned by Cornwallis, knowing that there was a threat in the mountains, to go to the foothills at a site just above present-day Rutherfordton. I hit it. Rutherfordton, North Carolina, which was called Gilberttown, and deliver this ultimatum. Switched hands because he didn't have use of his right hand at that time. If you do not desist from opposition to British arms, I will march my army over the mountains, hang your leaders, and lay waste your countryside with fire and sword. That is what excited the Overmountain Men to no end, and that's when they made the decision, let's go track him down and do away with this threat. Because he riled up the fervor of the typical Scotch, Irish, German, Swiss, rugged backcountry immigrants in the Carolinas, especially along the backwater sections and in the mountains, to rise up against the crown. Probably that was the fatal mistake, was delivering that propaganda message, because he had no idea of the effect on the Overmountain people.
Mm.
Well, you just can't tell mountain folk what to do anyway.
Good point. Yeah, Molly's from Boone, for instance, so I know all about that.
Can you tell us about some of the important leaders of the Overmountain Men, and maybe especially some of the ones who were North Carolinians?
Yes. Out of Eastern Tennessee, we had John Sevier. John Sevier, today, of course, Sevierville, Tennessee is named for John Sevier. We had in Western North Carolina, around the Tennessee-North Carolina state line, we had Isaac Shelby, which Shelby, North Carolina is named for.
Mm-hmm.
We had William Campbell, who was the leader and the overall leader of the Patriot Militia at the Battle of Kings Mountain, who was from the Holston Valley of Virginia. And his first cousin, Arthur Campbell, who also was a key leader assisting Colonel William Campbell. He was a redheaded Scot, and he had a fiery temperament, they say. And like Patrick Ferguson, on the other side, he carried a Scottish sword with him, and they say he was quite a formidable character on the battlefield. Then we had down in South Carolina, you had William Chronicle as a leader, and we had Winston-Salem. Partly Winston-Salem is named after Joseph Winston.
Oh.
From Forsyth County and Stokes County area, over what we would call today Pilot Mountain, around that neck of the woods. And then a big giant of a man was old Colonel Ben Cleveland. I could do a program on Cleveland, because he is such a vivid character. Folk hero elevation. If a patriot would have arrived on some of Cleveland's actions, they would even have a more interesting film with lots of turns and twists. He was notorious for hanging Tories. And probably holds the record in the Revolutionary War for hanging the opposition. Now, certainly, I believe that's true. He was absolutely ruthless. Sometimes Colonel Cleveland didn't have to have all the necessary information needed to convict somebody to hang him if they had Tory leanings, if you get the drift. But he was really an ardent patriot. When the Overmountain Men responded, and they had moved down to Gilberttown, and they found Ferguson wasn't there, because reconnaissance and a couple of people escaped and ratted on the Overmountain Men. Two men by the name of Crawford and Chambers defected and went to join the Tories. So learning this, Ferguson hightailed it back towards Cornwallis and Charlotte. But when he approached the South Carolina line, he saw a low mountain, which is shaped like a footprint on top, and known as Kings Mountain. And he said something to the effect like, "See there, men, there's Kings Mountain, and I am king of the mountain. Not even God Almighty will remove me from the mountain."
That was a mistake.
Yeah, he's there today. He's buried in a Scottish cairn pile of stones, if you've ever seen it.
Yes.
I put a stone on it there, and apparently that's to keep him from coming back out.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so, yeah, every year when we do the annual March to Kings Mountain, it's customary for all the Overmountain Men to walk past his grave and out of stone.
Yeah.
All the marchers. Of course, we've been doing the march, annual march, since 1975. That led to the formation of the National Historic Trail. Bill introduced by a good friend of mine, James T. Broyhill. He's in his 90s now.
Wow.
Lives in a nursing assisted facility in Winston-Salem. And he has been out on the trail numerous times. And he is an enthusiastic supporter of the trail. We introduced a bill signed by President Carter, and a bill that had complete bipartisan support. And the Overmountain Victory Trail was declared as a National Historic Trail on 200th anniversary of the battle. That is October 7th, 1980.
Cool. So you mentioned Cleveland just a little while ago, Benjamin Cleveland. I think the house that you're standing in front of has some connection to Benjamin Cleveland, right?
Yes. This house was actually located in Pelear, North Carolina. It was donated a few years ago to Wilkes Heritage Museum, Inc. And they took it apart piece by piece, put it back together like a puzzle, numbering all the pieces, and moved it down to the site where it would have protection at the Wilkes Heritage Museum. But this is the home, and built in 1779. And it was Bob Cleveland, like Ben Cleveland, was a great big man. Both men were over 6'3" and carried a lot of weight. I'm talking the 300-pound plus range.
Wow.
Bob was a captain in Cleveland's militia. As well, you hear the name William Lenore, from which Lenore, North Carolina is named after. Mm-hmm. William Lenore and his historic site, I definitely recommend that for all Outlander fans to go see. And it'll be open in the spring. Fort Defiance is in Caldwell County. It is a beautiful reconstruction. I mean, and actually preservation, because a lot of the artifacts inside are completely original.
Right.
Rather than being reenactment artifacts or recreations, they're actually original artifacts. And he basically, on the Yadkin, built what many have compared to the Monticello in Virginia, North Carolina's version of the Monticello, built with vast precision, very scholarly. He was the first president of the University of North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And the university system in North Carolina, the kind of thinker and civic person he was. He achieved some mighty good things in his lifetime.
We've been out to Fort Defiance. That was part of the homecoming for the first year, is that, everybody had an opportunity to go. And when I saw it for the first time, not knowing what Jamie and Claire's house was going to look like in season 4, his house reminds me a lot of the big house that Jamie and Claire have. It's not yellow like theirs. I think theirs is a yellow color. His painted red, which would have been a historical color at the time, I believe. But it's original. A lot of the things in the house are original items, and the cemetery there is very interesting too. So I highly recommend not only the Wilkes Museum to see Captain Cleveland's home, but also seeing General Lenore's home at Fort Defiance.
I've been involved out there a number of times playing music for a Valentine's colonial period Valentine banquets, and that's quite colorful there at Fort Defiance. And I've also been involved with some ghost storytelling at the cemetery.
I bet that's good.
So,
oh yeah.
My eyes light up when I talk about ghosts.
Yeah.
In fact, old Cleveland, there's several ghost stories around him. We'll get to those in another session, another time.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay. We're excited.
Maybe some stage for Fraser's Ridge, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll be telling some ghost stories for us in the fall too at the homecoming. So we're going to take us on a ghost walk. So we're excited about that. So we've talked about Patrick Ferguson. And we've talked about some of the leaders. What was the track that the Overmountain Men took through North Carolina, and why was there a reason why the trail that goes through? Was that the particular track that they took?
Well, they had information was basically transmitted by mail ponies, dispatch riders who took the information out. And it came from Isaac Shelby and John Sevier that the Wilkes-Surrey forces would meet the Overmountain forces at Quaker Meadows on the 30th of September, 1780, about 5 days into the march. And so the Overmountain men from the north actually started about the 23rd of October, rather, I meant to say October, the 23rd of October at present-day Abington, Virginia, at the Abington Muster Field today, which is a historic site and visitor center. They then went through Elizabeth in Tennessee and had the famous crossing of the Watauga River, the famous sermon by Reverend Samuel Doak, basically to follow the Lord and the sword of Gideon and go after the British and the adversary. Very powerful prayer done by Doak, who was a Scotch-Irish Presbyterian minister. Meanwhile, the forces in the Eastern Trailhead started about present-day Elkin, North Carolina, on the 27th of September. They encamped, and on the 26th, they encamped in Wilkesboro. They moved on down to about approximate location of modern-day Lenoir High School, and then, or the old Lenoir High School building, which no longer is a school operating this time. But then they followed on into Morganton, both arriving about the same time on the 30th of September, 1780. From there, the forces followed into South Carolina because they were together under one accord. And dispatch riders also delivered messages to freedom fighters, patriots in upcountry South Carolina, and even some from Georgia. And they would join the campaign as well subsequent days. And of course, September 30th through October 7th, and of course, we'll get to the weather in a minute, but they did encounter some weather problems.
Okay. And if you will, just go ahead and talk about the challenges that they faced with the weather and other things there.
Well, the first notable one, 28th of September, they were at Gillespie Gap, about where the Blue Ridge Parkway is, near the Orchard Alta Pass, not too far from the North Carolina Mineral Museum. And the old journals said that the snow was shoe mouth deep. Well, that's an old Scotch-Irish expression that's used to hear old timers say, shoe mouth, meaning that you probably were going to get snow in your shoe at that depth. And so then, of course, when they left Morganton at Quaker Meadows, they moved on down into Polk County. And for a few days there, they were on hold because it poured rain. And evidence shows that a huge tropical system came in and sat over North Carolina for several days in early October 1780.
Oh my goodness.
Basically, they got stymied or slowed down by a heavy rainfall from the tropical system that was in the Carolinas. But finally, the weather started improving some, and they began their march to Kings Mountain. Now, I'm not done with the weather yet, because on October 6, 1780, the Overmountain Men left at Calpian's battlefield, which was a place of another later battlefield, and also a historic place in terms of the Overmountain Men encamping there. It was known as Hannah's Calpians because it was a large cattle holding area. But on that night of October 7th, when they made their pitch, they made a decision to ride all night through the driving rain, some 30 miles to reach Ferguson at Kings Mountain the next day. And of course, the old journals say they trusted in God, kept their powder dry, because they used the powder horns, which are impervious to water, and they look pretty much like this. Actually, this was made by Steve Ricker, which you guys know and have heard before talk. He's really a good interpreter, but he put Cherokee designs on this Overmountain powder horn. He made this especially for me, which is kind of a powder horn that I treasure.
Well, and RG, they were on horseback. Were they not? Were there any on foot, or were they mainly on horseback?
Right. The old accounts say they rode up in their horse, barely being able to see in front of them, and just riding so that they could feel the presence of the horse in front of them and behind them till they got up at daybreak and were still riding. Fortunately, on that battle day itself, the sun came out October 7th. They approached the battlefield on 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The battle commenced. But I'm not going to cover the battle today. We'll do that in a subsequent presentation. But that's pretty much the framework of the story of the campaign.
Well, you said they started out from Tennessee, East Tennessee, September 30th. Is that right? How long was the whole march?
Well, they started from Abington, Virginia, about September 23rd.
Okay.
And the eastern leg started under Winston and Cleveland on September 27th. They both converged on September 30th at present-day Morganton, a place called Quaker Meadows. And it's about where Freedom High School stands today in Morganton.
It's amazing to me that back in that day that their communication was good enough that they met up. They were actually able to meet up.
Yeah. Well, they also used some things that they learned from the Native Americans along those lines. They have a mountain in Wilkes County called Rendezvous Mountain. What Bob would do, he lived at the base of Rendezvous Mountain. To gather his militia, he would light a signal fire on top of the mountain. Some of his men were patriots along the New River Valley in Ashe County. And they could see the signal fire and know it was time to muster. So they used tall mountains to light fires to signal for the militias together.
Mm. See, that reminds me of Jamie lighting the cross on fire to tell everybody that they were going, that they were going to go to the battle at Alamance.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, actually, he lit the cross when Claire was taken.
Yeah, that's right.
Still a signal. It was still a signal to everyone. So that's that's neat.
Their way of texting, but it was a little slower.
That's correct.
Well, RG, can you tell us about the Victory Trail and how we can see that today?
Yes. The website's very easy. Ooh. And you can even insert it in the chat box. It's ovta.org. Click on that and you can find out about our annual march, our interpretive programming. A whole lot about our activities will be found on that website.
Wow. Okay. ovta.org.
Yes.
Okay. And you can actually drive. You can actually drive that trail from the different points, right? Because I've kind of looked at the map, but I mean, you can't walk it, of course. I guess you could if you were industrious enough, but they actually have a trail that you can follow on your car and different stops along the way. I know you mentioned the orchard at Alta Pass. That's one of that was on the Overmountain Victory Trail. Fort Defiance is actually on the Overmountain Victory Trail. So, these highways kind of take you, I guess the trails that some of the people used way back in the day became major highways later. Or
can actually access the Overmountain Victory Trail / Yadkin River Greenway. The trailhead's about 100 feet to my left in that direction. I'm pointing there, adjacent to the Robert Cleveland House in downtown Wilkesboro. The Overmountain Victory Trail has given communities some economic life because we are building trail and greenways through communities that attract visitation. They increase our capability for equity involvement so that many populations of the underserved can learn of the story, can embrace the story, can experience a trail that might not otherwise be, because the greenways many times are located in urban areas, communities, communities of color, communities of diversity. We have rest homes and nursing homes that are on the corridor of the Overmountain Victory Trail. We have adult daycare centers. All those things we try to make available the Overmountain Victory Trail for a wider population.
And RG, just to like I said at the beginning, a lot of people don't understand how important the Overmountain Men were, and how important the battle was. And if you'll just share what Thomas Jefferson said about
Thomas Jefferson said, Kings Mountain was the battle that turned the tide of success for the gaining of America.
That's right.
And that's a pretty powerful, short, simple statement, but he meant it. And most historians today believe it was when we turned it around for the American cause. It was the first chain of events that led to the downfall of the British. Of course, we'll get into that in another session.
Right.
We'll talk about the battle.
The question I was getting ready to ask probably needs to wait for another day, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it today.
Okay.
It wasn't army versus army. This was it wasn't a battle of two armies. This was the local residents, like the Overmountain Men coming through, then the loyalists that Ferguson had recruited. Is that right? That it wasn't actually a battle like we would think about it with uniformed officers and that kind of thing.
That's correct. You had militias on both sides. Now, Ferguson's army was extremely well trained in battle execution and tactics, close-knit, trained in the art of warfare and drilled very closely. The American army were militiamen, totally. And they were basically fighting every man's their own officer behind rocks and trees, Indian style, guerrilla style, using the accuracy of their rifle at the Battle of Kings Mountain. It's just a different strategy. Right. Kings Mountain did not have any artillery or did not have any cavalry, as some of the battles like Cowpens, Camden, Guilford Courthouse did.
Right. All right. Well, RG, it's been great. You've given us a lot of great information. I'm excited about the next time when we're going to actually talk about the battle. And I know that's going to be very interesting. I appreciate you you've got the whole deal going on there with your attire and all your rifle and your powder horn. And thank you for the music as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Happy St. Patty's Day. And we'll see you next time.
All right.
You too.
Thank you, RG.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.